Well, Congressman Mike Lawler, thanks for stopping in here today. Welcome to snowy Buffalo, and
It's beautiful out.
come back in July.
Yeah, exactly.
It's even better. So, well, thank you. Fair to say that you're exploring a run for governor.
Well, thanks for having me, Bob. Certainly, we are looking at it, and having conversations across the state with important stakeholders and colleagues in government and party leaders and donors about the prospects and the pathway. I'm a New Yorker. I love this state. I've served in different capacities and traveled around this state. Been in every county multiple times. It's a beautiful state, but it has been hurt by a failure of leadership. And one-party Democratic rule in Albany has given us really disastrous policies. We have an affordability crisis, a quality of life crisis. You look at issues like energy and housing. These are real challenges across the state. Public safety. We're dealing right now with a strike by corrections officers. They don't feel safe in their jobs. This is a result of bad policy that has been enacted at a state level. And so, to me, it's a question of, A, is there a pathway? But B, can you make the credible case to New Yorkers about the issues that matter most, that cut across party line, that are not Republican or Democrat issues only, but really address the bread and butter issues impacting New Yorkers, the job market, housing costs, taxes. You look at energy policy, especially in upstate New York and Western New York. You look at, obviously, criminal justice reforms and how that's impacted the quality of life. So, these are big and serious issues that we have to tackle as a state.
And you're at Sumitomo plant today, too, right? And I'm sure that you have some thoughts about the economy of the state. But what's your point at Sumitomo today?
I think it's just representative of the challenge of doing business in New York. The fact is there have been so many promises made over the years by Governor Cuomo and now Governor Hochul about upstate investments and jobs, and oftentimes they just don't pan out. And yet taxes keep going up, regulations keep getting put in effect, energy costs have skyrocketed in this state. It's a difficult state to do business, and there's a reason we lead the nation in out-migration, and it has nothing to do with the snowy weather in Buffalo and everything to do with the cost of living and the cost of doing business. And so we have to take a real look at what we're doing. You need to cut taxes. You need to rein in government spending. New York State is proposing a $252 billion budget, more than double Florida's budget, and yet Florida now has 4 million people more than New York. That's not sustainable. Your tax base is leaving. And then you look at regulations. Over a decade ago, Senate Republicans did a study, and they found that New York had over 750,000 business regulations on the books. That's not a way to operate. So we need to look at what we need to do from the standpoint of cost, what we need to do from the regulatory standpoint, and what we need to do to actually bring manufacturing back to this state. The announcements about chips and science are great, but if your energy costs are through the roof, you're not going to get manufacturing to come here.
Well, what about the approach that Governor Cuomo had, the Buffalo Billion, and resulted in projects like the Tesla plant here in South Buffalo? Do you think that's the way to go, or is it the typical Republican proposals that we've always heard about? Hey, lower taxes, make it more affordable to live here. Is that the kind of message that you're proposing, or is there some merit to something like a Buffalo Billion proposal?
Well, picking winners and losers does not work. If the objective is crony capitalism, that ultimately is going to fail. And so the question to me is, how do you create a level playing field? How do you create an environment that actually allows for economic growth? You need investment. So yes, you do need state buy-in. Yes, you do need public-private partnership. infrastructure is critical. You have to invest in your roads, your bridges, your culverts, water, sewer. That all matters. That is a critical role of the state. You look at just throwing money at something and hoping it works out. We've seen that time and again in New York. That has not worked. And in fact, it's been to the detriment of the taxpayers and the community who had high hopes, and other businesses start investing, and then all of a sudden the rug gets pulled out from under them. You have to create a level playing field across the state. And I'll say this, you look at New York, historically, Wall Street was the golden goose for New York. Wall Street's leaving. The hedge funds are going down to Florida. The banks are going to other states. That's a problem for us. Access to capital is critical. Having that level of investment, the community banks are critical to get capital out into small businesses. So we have to evaluate how we're approaching this, not just from the standpoint of small businesses, but our financial markets. We need to make sure that Wall Street comes back to New York and thrives here, because that is what's allowed us to invest heavily in the infrastructure that is critical across the state. The other point I'd make is energy. Natural gas is critical for cost. It's critical for supply. 70% of electricity is generated by natural gas. And yet here in New York, we have a robust supply of natural gas, and we won't use it. It is foolish. It has harmed the upstate and Western New York economy tremendously, and it has driven up the cost of living and cost of doing business. If you want manufacturing to come to New York, if you want it to stay here, you need cheap, reliable, and responsible energy, all for renewables. But you need to have a comprehensive portfolio, and that includes natural gas. So one of the first things I would do as governor would be to end the moratorium on natural gas. We would build new pipelines. We would work to actually create an energy grid that is affordable to both residents and businesses.
So, Governor Hochul, let's look at her record. And if you look at the latest Siena poll, which I'm sure you have, her proposals in the State of the State and the budget are very, very popular. We're talking about the tax rebate and child care and those kinds of things are very popular. Yet she is not very popular. What's the problem here? Why do you think that she cannot get this message across? And I would assume that this is one of the reasons you're thinking about taking her on, is that she is not doing well in the polls.
She's the problem. I think she has proven herself to be ineffective, inept, and feckless. And when you look at how she is viewed, I don't think that's going to change anytime soon. She doesn't have the capability to change that. And you look at her decision-making process, you look at where she lands on issues, she vacillates from one end of an issue to the other very quickly. Look at congestion pricing. This is someone who touted the fact when she ran for Congress that she stopped the toll for commuters in Western New York, and then yet was all too happy to put a toll in place for commuters in the Hudson Valley, Long Island, and the outer boroughs to go to work in Manhattan. This is someone who, vacillated on the issue of driver's licenses for illegal immigrants. Meanwhile, now she's being sued by the Department of Justice over New York's green light law. So she's not someone who has core principles or values. I think that comes through. I think New Yorkers see that. She's very much, figuring out where people are and trying to make decisions based on that. That's not what we need. You look at where the legislature is today, there's no balance there. Rob Ortt and Will Barkley do a great job, and the Republican conferences pushing back, debating the bills, trying to force change. But Democrats have as close to absolute control as possible in New York, and the governor is unwilling to push back against the legislature. She's unwilling to lead on key issues, whether it's public safety or congestion pricing or taxes. let's see. Her proposal may be viewed positively. Let's see if she actually gets it done. The legislature has already said no. So I'll be curious to see how effective she is in actually forcing that through.
Nevertheless, you are venturing into the belly of the beast here today. This is Hochul territory. She lives practically a baseball throw from where we're sitting right now. And this is her turf, and it is, I think, a generally accepted principle that someone running statewide has to win a swing county, a big swing county like Erie County. What makes you think you can do that? You can come into her turf and win a key place like.
Look, Erie County is critical. When George Pataki and Dennis Vacco won in '94, Erie County was vital to their success. I've won now 3 times in 2-1 Democratic counties. I've won by going into every community in my district. 19% of my district is Latino. I have the second largest Haitian diaspora per capita in the country. I have the largest Jewish community in America in my district. I go in and talk about the issues. I think New Yorkers are practical. They have common sense. And they want someone who's actually going to lead, regardless of party, to get things done. And, ultimately, I think, folks in Western New York can see that she's not done an effective job, regardless of being from here, on the bread and butter issues that impact everyday New Yorkers. And so from the standpoint of, what makes me think I can do it, I've done it. And I've done it effectively by talking about the issues that cut across party line, by going into every community, building the coalitions you need. I represent a district that Joe Biden won by 10 points back in 2020. Yeah. There's 85,000 more Democrats than Republicans, and yet in this most recent election, I won by 6.5 points, about 24,000 votes. And that is a function of hard work. It's a function of delivering results. I'm standing up on issues that matter, like lifting the cap on salt. If we deliver on that in this reconciliation package, that's a big win for New Yorkers. That is something that will provide real and immediate tax relief as they struggle under the weight of New York State's, highest in the nation tax burden and the excessive spending that we've seen. Since Kathy Hochul took statewide office as lieutenant governor, state spending, with her proposed $10 billion increase for this next budget, would be up $100 billion. $100 billion since 2015. That's unsustainable. And yet she is doing nothing to slow that down. She's doing nothing to reduce the overall cost burden. Giving people a $300 check and saying, I did you a solid. Meanwhile, you're fleecing them out of $2,500 just to drive to work. You're not really saving anybody anything. If you really wanted to provide relief, you would reduce state spending and you would provide serious tax relief.
So obviously the question is, this is uber Democratic New York, okay? Yep. You don't need me to tell you that. And that no Republican has won statewide since Governor Pataki in 2002. So can this be done?
I believe it can. I believe it can. My gut tells me it can. We're evaluating the state and the voter file, but ultimately, I do believe if you present New Yorkers with a vision, if you present New Yorkers with a real choice, I believe New Yorkers are pragmatic, common sense people who just want to be able to provide a good life for their family. Regardless of whether you are a Republican or Democrat, we all want a few basic things in life. We want a good paying job. We want a quality education for our children. We want access to housing and health care. And we want to live in safe neighborhoods. Everybody across the state wants those things. And the question is, who actually has the vision to effectuate that and give New Yorkers the opportunity to succeed? We all know so many people who have left this state. And again, they're not leaving because of the weather. They're leaving because of the cost of living and the quality of life. And that is a problem. And something's got to give here. And I believe if you make the credible case to New Yorkers, we can win.
Oh, Lee Zeldin came close
Yep.
last time around, 6 points. And there are many who think that had he not been such an ardent supporter of Donald Trump, that maybe he might have done well in New York, where the president is not that popular. Now, given he did a lot better in this last election.
And according to Santa, is more popular than Kathy Hochul.
Yeah, right. So, but nevertheless, I assume that you are a supporter of the president. And how do you reconcile that? Can a Trump supporter succeed in a place like New York State?
Look, I did support the president, and I am working with him on the issues that matter to the country, from the border crisis to, addressing the challenges in our economy, reducing the cost of living, lifting the cap on salt. As a member of the Foreign Affairs Committee, I've focused a lot of time and effort on issues around the globe, including now serving as chair of the Middle East Subcommittee. So a lot of time focused on what's happening in the Middle East. But regardless of that, I do fundamentally believe New Yorkers want people who are pragmatic. I have been rated the fourth most bipartisan member of Congress. Last Congress, I passed 11 bills. 6 were signed into law by President Biden because I am willing to work across the aisle and negotiate to get things done on behalf of my constituents. Regardless of who the president is, we all have a responsibility to work with to get things done for New York. And so, to me, part of the problem in our politics today has been that everybody just reflexively wants to oppose the other side, rant and rave about the things they disagree with, rather than focusing on the area of agreement. And, Ed Koch famously said, if you agree with me on 9 out of 12 things, vote for me. If you agree with me on 12 out of 12 things, go have your head examined. We're not going to agree on everything. But we do have a responsibility to not only engage in robust debate and discussion, but find the area of compromise. My Democratic colleagues will tell you that I'm somebody they can work with, whether it was in the state legislature or in Congress, because I will go talk to everybody. I go spend time on the floor and just, chit chat with folks and get to know each other, in part because politics is relationships. Anything you do in life is relationship driven, but politics especially is relationship driven. We don't have to agree on everything, but we do have to understand the responsibility we have to get things done on behalf of the people that we represent. And so when I agree with President Trump, I'll say it. When I disagree with him, I'll say it as well. And that to me is what people are looking for. Be honest about the issues, be honest about where you stand, and try to find solutions to the challenges we're facing.
Well, what I'm hearing from you is someone who seems to consider himself a moderate Republican. Mm-hmm. And can a moderate Republican survive the primary process these days? I think back to 2010 when moderate Republican Rick Lazio faced off hard right Carl Palladino. Yeah. Carl Palladino wins the state 66-33. My favorite statistic of all time, Palladino wins Erie County 94-6%. Yeah. And basically as a precursor of Donald Trump, I think. So are you afraid that there could be someone who comes hard charging from the far right to knock off this moderate Republican, which, we have seen in Republican primaries, the moderates sometimes have difficulties. What do you think?
Well, first of all, I'm no shrinking violet, and I'm perfectly capable of not only articulating where I stand on issues, but making the case to voters across the political spectrum on those issues. But here's the reality of politics. There are no Pyrrhic victories in politics. It's 50+1. And you could be the most ideologically pure person and be so sure of yourself in that way that you are right and everybody else is wrong. And maybe you win a primary, but you certainly don't win a general election. And in as far as New York goes, the fight is in the general election. And if we want to win, we have to be able to build coalitions across the political spectrum. I am proud to have been supported by the Conservative Party. In every election I've run in and won. And I have support all across my district from conservatives. But ultimately, this is a question of how do you win a general election?
Right.
And, for me, I've proven my ability to do that and certainly keep the base in full support while broadening, the reach to independents and Democrats who really just want somebody who's going to be common sense and pragmatic. And so I'm not worried about that. If somebody wants to challenge, that's part of our democracy. That's the way it goes. But I think there's understanding, especially after the last election, that a primary does not benefit us here.
Right.
The objective has to be to unify. And I think we can get there.
How do you think the president's doing so far? I mean, he's riling things up. There's no question about that. But what do you think about things like his pardon of the January 6th crowd and his Doge efforts right now? And then even yesterday saying that President Zelensky started the war in Ukraine. I mean, these are all some things that are definitely getting people talking. What do you think about these things now he's doing generally?
So, look, overall, after 4 years of Joe Biden, in which the former president was oftentimes nowhere to be seen or heard from, I think obviously the American people are paying attention and certainly hearing from the president on a daily basis about the things that they're doing. In many respects, this has been more transparent an administration than many. Because they're telling you exactly what they're doing in real time. With respect to the Department of Government Efficiency, the fact is, yes, Congress is a co-equal branch of government. Congress often asks for information from the executive and oftentimes doesn't get it because the executive will stiff arm. Ask the state legislature about that. Ask the Erie County legislature how Mark Poloncarz treats them when they ask for information. That's the normal give and take of an executive versus the legislature. But here you actually have the executive releasing all of this information, putting it out there for the general public to understand exactly what is happening and where and what they're looking at. Is it perfect? No, sausage making is ugly. And they're going to make mistakes. And there are things where they have made decisions where I immediately called them, whether it was with respect to USAID and PEPFAR, and the need for a waiver, or whether you're talking about the CDC and the impact that may have on the 9/11 health program. And I immediately reach out because we should be addressing issues as they happen and make sure that any mistakes do get corrected. But I think the overall push is necessary. We are $36 trillion in debt nationwide. Over the last 2 decades, our debt has increased by almost $30 trillion. That is unsustainable. And so the question to me is, how do you actually produce savings unless you are willing to go line by line, department by department, agency by agency, and go through it? And no matter what members of Congress will tell you, the fact is they haven't done this effectively in decades. So they can say now, this is wrong. This shouldn't be happening. We should be providing this oversight. Well, then do it. Do it. And that's, to me, it should be collaborative. There are steps Congress is going to need to take based on what the executive does to either codify or moving forward with respect to the appropriations. But it's a necessary function right now to actually root out the waste, fraud, and abuse that we see in government. Now, January 6th, I said very clearly what happened on January 6th was wrong. It never should have happened. I was the first state legislator to put out a statement in New York opposing it on January 6th. It was my first day in elected office up in Albany. I said I did not support the decision to pardon violent criminals. If you committed a violent offense, and certainly against a police officer, should not have been pardoned. Were there instances and cases where people were overcharged or wrongfully convicted because they were simply in the building? Yes. And okay, they served time. They have no problem with that. But those that committed act of violence, whether it was on January 6th, whether it was in Minneapolis, whether it was in Portland, Oregon, when they took over a federal courthouse for almost 100 days, or in Minneapolis when they burned down a police station, yeah, you should be held accountable. Those are your decisions that you made, and I have no qualms about it. And then you look at the other issues that are happening right now. I've been a very strong supporter of Ukraine. I think Russia, China, and Iran have engaged in an unholy alliance around the globe designed to undermine and destabilize the United States, Europe, Israel, and the free world. I think President Biden did not do an effective job of combating this threat and allowed the world to spiral. We are in the most precarious place since World War II. So President Trump is coming in and inheriting a mess that needs to be cleaned up. I think we can all agree that the war in in Ukraine needs to come to an end. Question is obviously how to get there. I think you're going to have a negotiated settlement. Ukraine needs to be at the table for that. Yes, ultimately there will be a free and fair election in Ukraine, but I certainly will take no lectures from Russia on that front. Vladimir Putin is a vile dictator and thug, and certainly, as far as I'm concerned, has committed war crimes in Ukraine. So there's a lot of work ahead here. And I think what you are seeing, though, with President Trump, he doesn't always say things the way others do, but he forces the conversation. And there's no question he is going to force Putin and Zelensky to the table to come to a negotiated settlement. This war cannot continue in perpetuity. There's already been so many lives lost. You look at, obviously, the situation in the Middle East. The president's been very clear. Iran and its proxies, need to be contained and eliminated. And he's been a very strong supporter of Israel, very
as
strong,
you are too,
as
right?
I am. And certainly in my role as chair of the Middle East subcommittee, this is a lot of my focus is on how we are dealing with the situation in the Middle East, both in terms of getting Saudi Arabia to the table to negotiate and normalize relations with Israel, but also pushing back on the illicit oil trade between China and Iran, which is funding Hamas, Hezbollah, the Houthis, and other terror proxies in the region. So there's a lot of work ahead, and the president certainly understands that. I think his approach is in many respects designed to force people to uncomfortable conversations that need to happen, and I think it's something that obviously we're seeing play out.
I know you got to get going, so I'm wrapping up here. But what about Buffalo? What do you know about it? What do you think is the priorities here? What's the kind of approach you'll do there? Something that comes to mind is the state's commitment for $1.2 billion to cover the Kensington Expressway. I don't know if you're familiar with it. Controversial. A lot of people think that money could be spent in better ways. Yeah. What do you think is priority?
Look, I think number one is the economy, right? Western New York obviously has seen some level of investment from the state over the last decade plus. But as I was saying earlier, we need to have a reset in the state. We need to look across the board at what we're doing economically from a tax standpoint, from a regulatory standpoint, from a spending standpoint. That being said, the investments in infrastructure is critical to any community. But I think long term, Western New York needs that level of economic investment. One of the big failures of the Cuomo administration, frankly, was the fact that they didn't realize, and had you allowed natural gas in the southern tier, you could have had Buffalo, as opposed to Pittsburgh, as the hub of the natural gas companies in the country, and that would have been vital for Western New York. Obviously, the Pagula family has done very well in the natural gas industry in Pennsylvania, and certainly their commitment to Western New York and the Bills is important. But it's having a strategic vision for what Western New York, what Buffalo can be, in concert with what we're doing in the rest of the state. And so the critical infrastructure investments are key. Education is important. SUNY Buffalo is a vital institution out here. We have to make sure that what we're doing from an education standpoint is tied into what the economic base is in the community. We have to be looking at the tax and regulatory climate and structure to attract business to Western New York, to upstate New York. And that's, to me, top priority. If we want people to be able to stay here, to live here, to raise and raise their families, retire here, you need a vibrant economy that is flourishing. Obviously, the U.S.-Canada relationship is important to Western New York as well, and working through some of those challenges and the economic investment from that end of it. So, to me, the economy, infrastructure, they go hand in glove. You need that level of investment to help bring business here.
I'll finish up with this, and your colleague, Congressman Richie Torres, was here last week doing the same kind of thing that you're doing today. And one of the things he keeps saying is somebody like Mike Lawler can beat Kathy Hochul. I bet you agree with that.
I do.
Okay.
Richie's a good guy and a good friend. We obviously agree on some issues. We disagree on others. But that's kind of the point. You can still work together to get things done for the state.
Great. Congressman Mike Lawler, thanks very much for coming in.
Bob.
All the best.
Thank you.
You bet.